My interviewee today is Katie Raddatz.
Hello.
Hi. I don't know, Katie, do you want to say something about yourself as like what kind of teaching and tutoring and stuff like that you do?
Sure. I teach critical reading and writing and academic support. I teach first year seminar for the English department sometimes, and also am a graduate tutor, an undergraduate tutor, and I help coordinate the online graduate writing center, of which many of your classmates may have received emails.
Oh yeah, yep, you're the voice on the other end of those emails. I have gotten those. Oh, now I want to say hi and hang out, but we're going to be serious. So I guess, this is all about mobile learning, which I guess can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, but in its like very broadest form just means learning that you do using a mobile device like an iPad or a smartphone. I think that's its most basic way of talking about it. So can you just talk a little bit about how you could talk about how you use mobile learning, but before you get there, like why did you even think of using those kinds of technologies in your classroom? Like why did that even occur to you?
I was invited to a presentation at the library, at Healy Library, through a librarian I work with at the university. And it was a presentation on this new program they had started, excuse me, iPads in the classroom. And I just went. I don't know why I went. It wasn't anything I had any interest in really, but I was just kind of like, oh, I'll go to this. And the people they had speaking were English teachers. Who was it? Victoria. Do you know? Victoria?
Yeah. I always forget her last name stupidly. And what's her face? The other one who also teaches film studies.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Really horrible colleagues. Okay. Well, they talked about how they use the iPad in the classroom for research and even like some sorts of generating and peer review. And then I think I went to another conference and talked to some people about how they were using Google in the classroom and Google Documents specifically. And so I was starting to get these ideas about, oh, this is neat. I'd never had thought you could use this kind of technology in a writing capacity. But otherwise, I was taking students to like a computer lab to do research, or we were going to the library and using the computers in the library. And that takes a lot of time and people forget, and everyone's coming late with coffees and everything. So I just kind of started to think about what it would be like to have students have iPads in the classroom. And one of the 7 capabilities that we work on in CRW in first year seminar is technology literacy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think I was doing quite a great job at that. So I just explored, and I asked my supervisors, and I got connected with Mary Simone at the library and just kind of did a little bit of research on my own and just decided to try it out.
To go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, at some point, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of who your students are in your class and what are some of the challenges that you have, like engaging and teaching them and, just in general? Because I think that's really important.
Yes, that was actually, thanks for bringing that up. That was a really big point for me with the iPads. Was I deal with CRW students who place in, they have a little bit of a lower placement than maybe English 101, meaning they just need a little extra writing support alongside of English 101. So, so a lot of my students don't think of writing, it doesn't come to them naturally, or maybe they are like a science major and they're just not super well practiced at writing. And almost all of my students would identify as like being afraid of writing. And I had lots of problems my first semester teaching with students on their phones, which I think is probably for everybody. And then I would ask them to do something computer-based, and there would be all these kinds of issues coming up. Like, oh, I can't figure out how to attach something to my email. It just thinks that I'm like That's so strange. You're on your phone all the time. You are super wired in with technology. And when you hit a road bump, I guess, with technology, you immediately come begging for help. And I wanted them to be more autonomous. I think like my generation and your generation, like the internet came out when we were, I don't know, younger. And we didn't have a lot of people to teach us how to use the internet, at least in my experience. Like I couldn't ask my mom. She had no idea what was happening. So I had to figure things out, like click around and just figure it out. And I think this generation that I come into contact with a lot didn't have that kind of figure out period. So they just default to ask.
Yeah, one of the readings that we had in our instructional design class was about sort of against this idea of digital, quote unquote, digital natives, which is that people think if you're under 25, then you must be good at technology, which means like you understand how to use it, and any technology that's thrown at you, you're going to be good at, and that you're going to be able to use technology in a smart way in terms of your education. And
Right.
the article was just like, throw that right out the window, because people know how to use what they know how to use. Like they might be experts at, Twitter, but that doesn't mean they know how to edit a video, and it doesn't mean that they know how to do research or do group collaboration or anything like that.
Right. So yeah, I think all of those things kind of factored in to why I thought this would be especially good for my students, and how I was able to kind of pitch that to be part of the iPads in the classroom program.
So what is that program?
So that's a program at the library where you can sign up to be part of it, and basically you are given iPads certain days of the week for your students. Like maybe you have Tuesdays and Thursdays. A lot of different classes, music classes, art classes, writing classes, math classes use this. So when I first came into it, it was still like you had to be chosen to be part of it because there were such a limited number of iPads. And then because of the success with my students using the iPads, my department chose to purchase their own cart of iPads that we could use.
Art.
And then they allowed me to do something called MDM, which is mobile device management. And that means all the students could have their own iPad. And then as I decided that they would need an app, they would like send an app through to their iPad. So the students didn't have to go find the app and download it, and it didn't have to be programmed prior to them getting it. They just had this iPad, and then I would say, I want them to use, this program Poplet, and they would shoot it through, and it would just appear on the student's iPad.
Now, do the students take the iPads home, or they just use them in the classroom?
In my class, they take them home, and I've done that with a couple different classes.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, okay, so they can use them for all their classes.
Whoa. All right. So I kind of I'm thinking about this, and I was like, so some of the mobile people we've talked to about mobile learning talk about sort of the end product and what it looked like after people did a lot of trial and error and came up with these great ideas to do. And I want to hear about that from you. But the thing that I keep having questions about is like, teachers, this isn't usually in their wheelhouse. And so how do you go from being someone who maybe has an iPad, maybe doesn't, maybe uses it, maybe doesn't, to like being an awesome kick-ass mobile learning instructor? So does that sound good to you? Do you want to talk about like that first semester and how you tried to prepare and what that first semester was like?
Yeah. So the first semester, there was just a ton of apps on there already that other teachers were using. And I just kind of played around with those. And I was like, I'll do this one and this one and this one. And it was very, very experimental at that stage. And the students were only getting the iPads like twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I think. So sometimes we didn't use them because I wasn't so well practiced and prepared that we used them every time they were in the classroom. And some students were like super resistant. They didn't want to use them. So then once we purchased our own iPads, I felt like maybe a little more responsible for like becoming more educated on the different apps. A woman from Apple Education came and spoke to me and showed me a bunch of really awesome apps. And she had a great presentation. She talked to me one-on-one and recommended certain apps that I should get for my students. And then from there, I just started to do more research. Apple had a lot of great research on what was working in people's classrooms. Google has tons of great research on how people use different apps in the classroom. And it's all been pretty much like just me kind of experimenting and exploring and seeing what works and what doesn't work with the students.
So that first semester, what kinds of things did you try, and like what went well, and then what like didn't go so well the first
I'm just gonna grab my charger, just 1 second.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
I feel like I should talk now so that the camera's on me. But Katie's not here.
Okay. So first semester, definitely one of the things that has always gone well is using the iPads for research with the librarians. And my librarian is really pretty well versed in how to use the iPad to do the things they would do in the library. So I would say that was like the first and foremost, the best thing that we used. What didn't go well? Well, sometimes it would be an issue with just like connectivity. We wouldn't necessarily be able to get connected, so we ended up getting a router in the classroom. Sometimes I would ask them to do some kinds of writing on the iPad, like do a free write, and a lot of students really hated that because they didn't like typing on the iPad. They wanted to type on a keyboard, and I didn't have keyboards to provide them with, so that was kind of a struggle. Another program that has gone really well, and I don't think I discovered this in the first semester, but it's called Poplet, and it is like a mind map kind of program, like how you would do, what do they call them sometimes? Mind web or something, like an outline with the circles. It basically does that for you, and then you can like bring in pictures and bring in videos and bring in all sorts of stuff to your mind map. And students responded really well to that. Also, I used a lot of different annotating apps so that they would get really comfortable with annotating text, and I made all of their text available PDF. First semester, I think I was emailing them their documents, and so then they'd have to figure out how to log on to their email through the iPad web browser to download the document. I mean, there was like a lot of lag time with that. And one of the things that really surprised me the first semester was that a lot of students didn't know how to use an iPad. Like they hadn't used one, they didn't have a lot of practice with it, or if they had, it was like not their own iPad, it was like a friend's iPad, so they weren't really using it in academic or educational ways. And so I took that for granted that I was gonna have to spend some time teaching them how to use the iPad. Yeah. So I would kind of hear about different apps. Like my librarian one day said, have you heard of this app, Haiku Deck? And she showed it to me, and it's almost like PowerPoint, but it's a little different. And she just was showing me how people used it. She said, I thought maybe you could use this in your class. And I got the app and just played and played and played with it until I could think of a way to really use it in my class that was for something different than what you would use PowerPoint. And I always ask my students, like, what was it like to use that app? Did you like it? Why did you think you liked it? And when we used Haiku Deck, they responded very well to it, and they said they liked it because it allowed them to use some of their creativity in a different way. It's kind of hard to explain, sorry, because I'm not showing you that app. But
I think that's sort of the nature of the beast. I think you're probably going to rattle off a bunch of apps that you use, and then whoever watches this is going to have to go and play with them themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is great. You know, like you could probably at this point lead like a 4-week course in using iPads in like pedagogy, and we could spend hours all like sitting around and playing with and sharing ideas. But at the same time, some of that you can go and do yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's most fun is like giving yourself some time to kind of like think outside of the box and how you could do things that you do in the classroom differently with the iPad.
So now that you're using the iPad more in the classroom, how have things changed for you in the classroom, for the students, for you as a teacher?
I think in the classroom, it has definitely created much more community and connectedness between the students when we work on things together. There seems to be just like a little bit different level of excitement about working on things together because they are also kind of teaching each other how to use the iPad and, oh, well, let's do it this way. Let's, like you hear a lot of different collaborative techniques. For me as a teacher, it has allowed me a lot of freedom to say, you have to do this. You should have no problem accessing this, or like pull out your iPads and look up that word right now, or something like that, where it's like, because I've given them this iPad to use, there's a certain level of responsibility they have to engage in certain ways that they might not have otherwise.
One thing that one trend in higher ed that people talk about is the bring your own device trend, the BYOD.
Yeah.
And my big thought about that was, okay, I mean, that's basically what I do in my classroom now is I have my students bring in, I go back and forth, but like I go from all paper and pencil so that everybody's on the same page and using the same things and I can give the same instructions to everybody. And now by the middle of the semester, I'm back to like letting them bring in a device like a laptop or a tablet and work on that. But it's a huge issue if everybody is on a different device.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I say like, okay, you're going to need to annotate this. And then I need to go around and check and make sure that everybody is actually annotating and that they're in a program that they can annotate and that they know how to.
Right.
So I think that's like a major issue with bring your own device is that people have different, and if some people are on a tablet and some people are on a laptop, it's going to be totally, the instructions about how to do it are going to be totally different, and there's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like if everybody has the same device and you can teach them, okay, here's how you use this program, and then it's like, now it's their responsibility. And I love that you use the word freedom with that.
Yeah.
That like, now I have the freedom to say, like, you know how to do this, go do it.
Right.
Such an interesting way to think about a requirement for your students.
Yeah. It doesn't go without problems though. Like as much as I would love to say, okay, everybody open up, the Poplet app and start making a Poplet and that to just kind of happen across the classroom. One of the main lessons I've learned using this technology is like, somebody's is going to be dead or like somebody is going to be frozen screen or not be able to sign on to the MDM server or not have a Google or an iTunes account so they can even receive things or just like all sorts of different weird problems that come up with the iPad that it's like you have to have another plan in your pocket and you also have to be really, I find that you have to be very calm in reminding the students that these problems happen. Like, okay, if your iPad isn't working, maybe you can look on with, Isabel's iPad and just go together and, they're still resisting it because there's that need with technology that like, I need to figure this out right now. I have this thing in my hand and it's not working and I need to figure it out. And they can get kind of lost in that and then forget that we're actually doing a writing assignment on the iPad. So it is like when it works well, it works really well. And when it doesn't, I've had to teach myself a lot about kind of teaching them how to just remain calm and allow it to, set it aside and we'll figure it out later kind of thing.
So now that you're kind of like a more clearly, like you've had a bunch of semesters of this under your belt, what are some apps that you've used in the writing classroom that you think are cool and what's cool about them?
So my favorite that I already mentioned, but I'll talk a little more about it, is Haiku Deck. And it is really neat. It has a bunch of images and backgrounds already stored on it, and it's web-based. So if you were to type in on a slide like bird, it would come up with all these different pictures of birds that you could choose to kind of structure or format your slide. So that's really fun if you're doing a presentation, but I wanted to learn how to use that in the classroom while we were learning, like while we were talking. And so I've had them use it to do triple entry notes, which when, you know this, but I'll maybe explain it for anybody else, is when you take a quote from a book and then you interpret that quote and then you kind of answer, so what? And so I had them, like, we were reading Fahrenheit 451, and I had them pick a quote that they really liked from the book and then put that quote on a slide and then find some pictures and images that really embodied that quote. And then kind of like doing like all this. So they were analyzing the text, but they were also thinking about another form of analyzing the text with images. And then we presented them all together, and it was 3 slides each person. But they had a lot of fun with it. We were able to do it in class, and they were really, really eager to show what they did, which was different.
Yeah, so they got a quote from Fahrenheit 451 and they put that on like one slide.
Yep.
And then the next slide they had to find like
in your own words, interpret it. I say interpret it, put it in your own words. And so maybe they picked a quote that was like about stopping and, you know, appreciating nature. And they would say this, you know, one should stop and appreciate nature. And then maybe their background would be like a tree or some kind of beautiful sunset. And then the final slide would be, so what, where they would say something along the lines of, this is important because in the society of Fahrenheit 451, everybody's going really fast and not appreciating the world. And then one student found a slide that was like blurred lights, like if you were driving really quickly in a car. So it just like fit really, really perfectly. And it allowed them, I asked them why they liked it, and that's what they said. They had to think about the book in a different way, creatively.
One thing, this is bringing up like a whole other topic of conversation for me, but so in terms of how to use like digital stuff in the classroom and bring in creativity, like I was at least one conference where people were talking about digital composition or something, and basically talking about having students display their knowledge in a way that wasn't writing an essay.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they can make a presentation or a video, or I think that was the idea. And my sticking point was always like, but our students are in our classes because writing is really hard for them. And so if their final product is not an essay, then they're kind of missing the point of the class. Like that's the part that's really hard for them. And so what I see you doing here is like, they're still writing and analyzing text, but they're also having to bring in like other parts of their brain and creativity. Yeah. Do you still have like their final product be like an essay and writing that they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, these are all kind of like little activities I use for them to get to the essay. I do have them do a presentation, which I've had them do recently on VoiceThread. Do you know about that?
Yes, I have just learned about VoiceThread. And the thing that I realized about VoiceThread that I didn't know when I was watching other people's VoiceThreads is that you have to make the presentation in another program, download it, and then upload it to VoiceThread, and then you can put comments and stuff on it.
Yeah, so we did I did an experimental thing last semester with VoiceThread on the iPads where they all did their presentations via VoiceThread, and they were required, each of them, to watch each other's presentation and comment on that presentation. And I like canceled a class or something to give them a little extra time because they were going to be watching it. And I think people who didn't normally speak in class, and I think it's also really tricky to speak about other people's presentations in class when the person's up there standing and giving their presentation. You're like, does anyone have any questions? Like very generally, I feel like people are just like, no, good job. Where this, I was requiring them to be kind of critical or engaged. I saw really, really great results with that, the way they responded to each other's work, and that kind of created more community. I wish I would have done it before the end of the semester because it was really helpful in how they were talking to each other.
So I think you've touched on this a little bit, but what kinds of changes have you seen in like student engagement or student response, or even in like overall learning and I guess like results, right? Like your class is designed, the CRW class is like designed to help them kind of like learn how to learn, navigate the university, but also help with their writing skills.
Yeah. So I think I've identified like three main things that I noticed in my students. One is higher level of engagement, like a little more excitement around the topic. Higher level of engagement in the classroom for sure, like just actually being there, being present, not being on their phones. And a better sense of community, talking to one another and working together. And I was really impressed with different kinds of creativity that came in, because I think like kind of what you were saying, like we're here to teach them how to write an essay, here to teach them how to write. And they already come in with a bunch of ideas of what that means, that sometimes kind of like knocking them off of those ideas by having them do something that feels totally different than what you would do in a writing classroom will cause them to reevaluate how they approach writing. So doing all these like little weird projects with outlines, the Poplet app, which I started to talk about, is making them outline, but they're not thinking of it as outlining because they're thinking about using this app. You know what I mean? So it's like almost like putting them in a place of discomfort, or just like a different mindset. And then they start to make the connection, hopefully, they start to make the connection that, oh my God, I can use this thing to actually write the essay. And that's different than how I would have ever approached writing before.
Sounds like your sort of your whole approach to how you're thinking about teaching has kind of shifted by using this technology.
Yeah, definitely. It's more exciting for me. And I always like to be, I hate teaching the same thing over and over and over again. So I generally like change my topics and do all sorts of new research. And this has like allowed me to keep things really fresh and different. And I always, at the end of the semester, ask my students if they have any apps that they think would be good to use in class, and just always reevaluate, because technology moves so quickly. I'm always reevaluating how I could better use it in my classroom. And that keeps things really exciting for me as a teacher. And I think it also makes the environment of the classroom one in which we're both learning and we're side by side learning, and that changes everything. It just changes everything in the classroom.
And also that the student, I mean, this is something so I took this project of mobile learning, and then I remembered that my dad actually teaches a course at Lesley in the teacher ed program on mobile learning and apps in K through 12. And he said something really similar to what you're saying, or I noticed a similar thread, which is that like students go from being learners who are like supposed to absorb information and not know stuff to being people who know stuff, and then they're actually teaching other students and they're teaching the whole class.
Yes.
And that like I could see how that dynamic could be uncomfortable if you're a student and you're freaking out that it feels weird that you know more about a content area than your teacher would, right? Like that would probably feel uncomfortable. But if your teacher is like, here, I'm here to like engage you guys in the content area, but everybody is like learning how to learn about it. Does that make sense? Like that seems to be really powerful.
You get a lot of resistance with it in a similar way that you can get some resistance to peer review. Like I've had students before say, I don't want that student to read my paper. I want you to read my paper. And then I always ask them like, well, let's examine what that's really about. But it's a very similar thing where it's like, they want me to have an answer for them on every single part of this technology. And I'm like, I don't know. You just have to kind of play around with it a little bit. Like, let me sit by you and we can talk it through a little bit, but really it's not, I don't have some ultimate answer, like swipe left 2 times and you're going to get this thing. Like you have to really become an autonomous student when you're using technology. You really do. Like there's no guidebook for the iPad, unfortunately. So they have to just really play around with it.
Do you think by the end of your course that they're more confident about using technology and like learning, knowing that they can learn to use new technologies?
I don't know. I've asked them that, and a lot of students have said, like, no. They say that they're the same. They identify themselves as being the same, but there's no way, from my view, that they're the same. Does that make sense? Like, they might think like, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. I'm just the same. I have the same technology literacy as I did before. but I see them using technology in different ways than they ever had before.
Do you think it makes a big difference that they can take the iPads home with them?
Yes, enormous.
What do you think's the impact?
Well, it also gives me, like I was saying earlier about freedom, it gives me freedom to just be like, you have to do this reading at home. It kind of eliminates a lot of excuses that students come in with, right? Oh, my internet broke or whatever. Like, I guess they could still say that with the iPads, but it's like less likely. Like they're given this thing, they have to use it. Also, there's like this really huge excitement around being able to take the iPads home that I never expected. And me telling them, you can put whatever you want on here. We're going to erase it at the end of the semester. You can put whatever games you want or tools. And I just think that they really like that. They respond to it like it's a treat or some awesome perk of being in the class. And that just really excites me because I've never given out a book or a syllabus and had that reaction. So the fact that I can give them something that they're going to use in class and have them be that excited about it really is kind of neat.
And I imagine that they use it for other classes also.
Yes, some do. Some, it really differs from semester to semester. Like I've had a couple students this semester who are like, I don't want to use the iPad. Do I have to? And I really, really urge them to use it. But sometimes I'm like, okay, fine. You don't use the iPad. That's okay. As long as you can still do all the assignments.
Do do they like write on the iPad, or do they tend to try to do they write on a laptop or a desktop and then, put it into an app and then manipulate it on the iPad?
Sometimes they type. I've had certain classes. It's weird how, like the culture of a class changes. I've had certain classes that were like totally fine with typing on the iPad and were like rapid fire able to type on the iPad. Like turned it to its side and we're just like bam, 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 bam. Like you could hear their fingers hitting the screen typing. And then I've had other classes of people who were like, I hate typing on the iPad. I'd rather type on my laptop. And I allow them to do that if we do any sort of in-class writing. But when it comes time to commenting on the writing and like, organizing and manipulating the writing, I ask them to do that on the iPad generally.
So I just thinking about time and we could probably keep talking about this for a long time, but I want to make sure we're respectful of both of our times. So like apps that you've mentioned, we've got Poplet and Haiku Deck, both of which I've heard of and neither of which I played with and I'm super excited to. Do you want to do just a quick rundown of apps that you'd recommend that people check out and explain maybe how you've been using them briefly?
Sure. So VoiceThread also is an app that it can also be used on the desktop, but the app is great. And that I explained how I use that. I use Google Classroom instead of Blackboard, which is like the big no of UMass, I know.
I was going to ask you about that. Blackboard actually has a pretty decent app if you.
It does.
I've been using it. But anyway, I've been listening to people talk about their pedagogy and how they teach online or using technology. And a lot of people are using Google. I've taught a whole semester using just Google Drive as my learning management system. I've switched back to Blackboard because I got sort of like sternly talked to by the instructional designers, and there's good things about it. Yeah. So but Jesus, do I miss Google Drive?
Right.
It's everything that I want as a writing teacher.
Yeah. It's wonderful. And we have Google abilities at UMass. Like as you probably know, you can use like certain education apps. So Google Classroom, I've also had some problems with it too, with some of my students just like not getting it, but I like it because it's very simple. And I love how it reminds students like what's due and when it's due. So that's an app I've used. iTunes U is really, really wonderful. And if you don't end up using it in your class, okay.
Sorry, I'm getting my chart.
Okay. If you don't end up using iTunes U in the classroom, it's still really neat because there's a bunch of courses on there where you can explore as yourself. Like you can take a meditation course and look at all the curriculum and syllabus and lessons through iTunes U. And I use iAnnotate, which is a PDF annotation device, and it has lots of great features. It allows you to keep all of your PDFs annotated in a library. That I think is a wonderful annotation device, but I've also used one called Notability. And I'm thinking of other ones that I've used. Of course, Google Drive, Google Documents. I think those are my top that I would recommend. I've explored and experimented with a lot of others, but those are the ones that seem to be the best of the best in terms of how I use them in class.
Yeah, I think I've used Notability and found it to be like a little clunky. And then I've used iAnnotate. The iAnnotate is not a free one, right? That one it's like $10 or something.
Right. A few of them I use are not free. So also the Poplet, you can get a Poplet Lite, but I have like the Poplet Full, and that's not free. But otherwise, I think all the rest I mentioned are free. Maybe Haiku Deck isn't. I'm not sure.
Does Google Classroom, is it like a full learning management system where you can like post assignments and then post grades and people can see their grades?
It's really great. Like, I love how easy it is. And for me as a teacher, it's super simple. You can grade, you can make notes. And of course, if they're writing their papers in Google Docs, you can go in there and like highlight and, you know, add punctuation if you need to. And one way that I've liked using it in the past is like asking them to make revisions to that draft, and then I can see all the revisions they've made. So I think Google Classroom is great, and it's changing every year. It's growing. I was in on it like right at the very beginning. Before it was even a thing, I asked if I could be in on it, like a pilot program, and I started using it immediately. And it's very simple, and it reminds me of like Facebook. It's like a news feed. And so I think that students respond pretty well to that too.
Wow. Oh, I'm so excited to check that out because, you know, so I've switched using Blackboard and it works, but it's so cumbersome and clunky to change anything.
Yeah.
It actually really, like, I can't even imagine changing a unit in my semester because it's so much flippin' work to change anything. And I think that's so antithetical to what teachers need to be doing. So
yeah,
I'll check that out. Yeah, those are some good apps. What was I going to ask you? Oh, so I guess I'd say like, it sounds like you had a huge amount of initiative on your own to go check this stuff out and learn about it. But it sounds like some sort of key institutional supports made it possible. Because one thing we're talking about is sort of what are the barriers to mobile learning? And it seems like, you know, and so sometimes K through 12 schools have like a ban on cell phones in the classroom. And so that's definitely a barrier. Sounds like for you, you know, bringing the iPads in actually sort of like replaced the way that people were playing on their phones.
Yes, for the most part.
Yeah. But, you know, another barrier obviously is the fact that like, you bring your own device has all these limitations. And so it sounds like for you, this institutional support of, you know, going to the presentation and just hearing about it and having a librarian to work with and tech support, but also having this thing happen where you guys got the iPad card and people got iPads that they could take home was like huge in making this happen for you.
Yeah, I had a lot of support from my supervisors, and also I've just found that like having a lot of freedom with it and not having people like tell me what I needed to do or say, oh, you need to use this app and this app or anything like that has helped me make it more of my own, and I feel a little more comfortable with it that way.
Now I guess I kind of have to ask like it's not really a political question, but a huge question that I've had in terms of learning about technology in higher ed is that, all right, a lot of us are adjunct professors or non-tenure track. You know, we come in semester by semester, and, you know, in some ways, sort of the way that we're supported in the university is like, we're sort of like loosely affiliated. And so I was just wondering, I don't know, for you as, you know, as a non-tenure track instructor, you're not getting you know, like you're not supposed to be doing service. No one's paying you to do this, or maybe they are, if so kudos, but like, I don't know, how have you balanced that kind of, that aspect out? The fact that like, you know, you've done this on your own initiative. Have you felt like recognized? or is this just sort of your own personal satisfaction of becoming like a kick-ass digital literacy teacher? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, I think that I have not, I did have a lot of initiative. No, I do not get any sort of compensation for it. I thought once I did this, everyone was going to do it. And so I was like, cool. And what happened was not that, that like people are like, that's really cool what you do. And then they don't do it. They just kind of listen to me talk about it. And so I've become like this iPad person in my department, which is really great. And I never did it for any sort of recognition or anything. I just thought it was like interesting and I love learning. But it's happened now that a lot of people have asked me to, like, I presented at the library and like people have come and talked to me about these things and set up certain kinds of meetings. And like even us getting the iPad cart was largely because of my using the iPads. And it wasn't something I asked for. They were just like, hey, we want to do this. Let's do it. So it has benefited me. I think it's really great on my resume, and it's a really interesting research area that I can explore for presentations and stuff. And it's just kind of like another specialty that I can choose to hone in on and use in the future. You know, like I would love to take a class like you're taking to think of how it would have more practical implications for me to use technology. And I love hearing about it, reading about it, and talking about it. So it's kept me pretty engaged.
Cool. I think the whole world of adjunct teaching is so interesting because we're all in it because we love teaching. And yeah. I actually love how like professional development becomes this sort of like viral thing that happens for us because we're so like loosely connected to everything and that we have to learn from each other. Yeah. And so we do because we like care about it a lot. But it's also interesting that like just from this particular example, it's not the institution driving the innovation in the classroom. It's actually the individual instructors who are like pulling the institution along with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dream is like all the grants for all the learning for all the teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Well, this is so cool. I want to like take your semester-long course about how to use iPads in the classroom and all that stuff. But yeah, and let's see. I think are you like have like a blog or a Twitter, like a web presence where you're putting some of this stuff out there in the world?
No, that is something I've thought and definitely should do. But I was going to tell you, I can share with you my Prezi from the presentation I gave at the library, which is a lot of what I've said here, but also maybe a little more eloquently put or something with a pretty design to it or something that if you want to look at that. And yeah, I guess that's all I have.
Yeah. Would it be okay if I shared those on like Twitter or
absolutely
or whatever?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Katie, this is really great talking to you. I sort of thought maybe you like used iPads one day a week in your classroom and like used iAnnotate with them. I had no idea you're doing all this stuff. So this is like such a gold mine. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for choosing me to talk to. It was fun.
Yeah, and maybe I'll put up your contact information if other people in the class, in like my instructional design class, want to talk to you about it.
Sure, absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Katie.
Okay, thank you. Talk to you later.
Sure. Bye.